Well, good day everybody and welcome back to the channel. So I have what looks like a typewriter. Yes, you are correct. Good guess. What is the typewriter? Well, let's see here. What do you think? It's silvery gray. It's not pretty and two-tone like a lot of its other stablemates. What am I talking about? Well, this is actually, the name of this is Exemplar 300. But if you notice some of the features here, this is actually a Princess. That's right, a Princess Exemplar 300. And the reason why I know it's an Exemplar 300 is because it has the owner's manual with it. This was distributed by Polk Brothers Typewriter Company out of Chicago, National Distributors. And then somebody has written Princess above it. Okay, so it was manufactured in 1957, which places it at the same year of my birth, and this kind of ironic that there's also a few other typewriters in my stable that also have been made in 1957. But so if you're familiar with the Princess models, you might notice the carriage return lever. It flips up like that. There's a little kind of a button on the center of the left platen knob. You tuck the carriage return lever into the little gap, and then when you push it back to the right, that lever centers the carriage. It's not a true locking device. And of course, the typewriter is screwed into its base. So the bottom of the case, there are screws here that secure the typewriter. So you could take it out of the case. It's just a little bit inconvenient to do so. It sort of reminds me of the Underwood 4-bank portables from the late 20s and 30s. So I have added some hose bib washers above the hard rubber feet to give a little bit more grip and to make these feet a little bit tighter. So there is a problem with these. Otherwise, this center screw would not be threaded all the way in and it would be scraping the surface of your table. And these are the kind of washers that I'm talking about. Well, there's a couple of other giveaways that this is actually a Princess. The main giveaway is the push button Bichrome adjustment or Bichrome setting. This reminds me, I believe, the Toyota Corona, forerunner of Corolla, back in the 60s had a push-button transmission. The buttons were on the dashboard. This kind of reminds me of that. There's a colored window, and you push this button, and it toggles between the three states, upper, lower, and stencil position. The other setting you might be aware of is the tab setting button here on the right side. It has this rocker switch, kind of plus and minus for tabs with the red tab key. That's another dead giveaway. And on the back of the machine, however, it doesn't say Princess or anything. What it does say is precision made in Western Germany, which is very cool. So another West German typewriter to go along with some of my other portables from that part of the world. Now, this is interesting that if you go to the inside front cover of the owner's manual, they show you a breakout diagram of all the features of the typewriter. And on the left front of the ribbon cover, which would be right here, it is clearly indicated Exemplar 300 in the actual illustration, but this one does not have those stencils or graphics. And looking at the light shining off this, I don't see any evidence that it did. So either this is a really good repaint, or the stencil came off and never left any residue, not even any outline of the letters or anything. But it looks to me like it's original paint just from the color. There's a few chips here and there. So for some reason it does not have the Exemplar 300 badging on the ribbon cover. So other than that, the only way you can tell is really from the features, just comparing what it looks like with a Princess. A lot of Princesses I've seen are kind of a really striking two-tone color scheme, makes them very beautiful and desirable by a lot of collectors. This one is kind of drab silver gray, so instead of a Princess, it's a Popper. Is it the Popper, not the Princess, or Prince and Popper, Popper Prince? Well, these Princess typewriters were made by Keller and Nappisch in Western Germany, and they appear to have three different body styles. This body style is probably the most common that you see, that I call the curvy body style. But as far as the various models, if you go through the typewriter database, you'll see quite a few of them. So they have the Princess 100, 200, and 300 in this body style. The 100 has no tabs or bichrome. The 200 has bichrome and no tabs. And the 300 has both bichrome and tabs. And this Exemplar 300 is essentially identical to the Princess 300, just the badging or name is different. Then there was a Princess 400 and 500, and this went with a square kind of angular body shape, not the same as what we considered the classic Princess. The 400 had bichromes and no tabs. The 500 had both bichromes and tabs. And then there was a Madam 500, and it's like the Princess 500. It has both bichrome and tabs, but it was the square body shape. And then there was an early body style just called the Princess, and this was in the late 1940s. It had no bichromes or tabs. And then there was the Princess Special, which was the curvy body style, and it kind of like the Princess 100, no tabs or no bichromes. And then there was a series of models called the Princess Standard, and it was the curvy body style. The early versions in the early 50s had no bichromes or tabs, but later on in the 60s, they had bichromes, but still no tabs. So all the different variations of the Keller and Napish machines, generically known as the Princess, in this case, it is the Exemplar 300. And I did go through some older typewriter blogs, going all the way back as far as like 2014. And some people were saying that the Princess line weren't imported in the US. And then somebody else mentioned actually they were. In fact, they mentioned this very same Polk Brothers typewriter company out of Chicago. It even mentioned the kind of offset printed kind of booklet. Probably the Exemplar 300 was the U.S. import of the Princess, given a different name, given, of course, a U.S. keyboard. Well, the Princess here, or the Exemplar 300, is an interesting typewriter to me because when I consider ultra portables or flat portables or lightweight portables, as far as full-featured ultra portables, up until now I've always considered like the Lettera 22 to be the most full-featured because they had tabs and bichrome. But this Exemplar has tabs and bichrome, and it's probably very close in size to a Lettera 22, maybe even a little smaller. And that's interesting. So this is one of the more fully featured ultra portables. Well, I think the most obvious feature that sets the Princess line apart from a lot of other typewriters, at least the ones with bichrome settings, is the push-button bichrome. So there's a little colored window here, and this one looks sort of greenish, not blue. That's the upper part of the ribbon. And then it goes to red, and then it goes to what should be white, but it looks kind of beige or slightly yellow. That's a very cute feature. It's maybe overly complicated just to do a bichrome, but it's certainly an interesting feature that sets it apart from a lot of other machines. Well, it's a standard US keyboard, and it is made in 1957, so it lacks the number 1 key. Instead, it has the plus and exclamation mark, and it has 3/4 fraction and an equals on the upper right corner, a 1/4 fraction like you generally expect on a US keyboard. It has the standard apostrophe that's a shifted 8. Hyphen is lowercase here with the asterisk. Underscore is a shifted 6, so very similar to a lot of other US keyboards at the time. The backspace is on the right, and the margin release is on the left. And the margin release is not a keyboard de-jammer. Tab key, of course, is off to the right, and the tab set and clear are right here, this little toggle switch, so you have full tabulation, which is very cool. So the paper bail has 2 fingers, one on each corner, which makes lifting the paper bale very convenient. And this particular one has an engraved scale that goes up to 95. So measuring the size of the type, it looks to me like it's pretty darn close to 11 characters per inch. So on the right side of the Carriage, of course, you have your Carriage knob. You have your Carriage release button. This machine only has a Carriage release on the right side. And then the paper release for the feed rollers is right here. And of course, the right margin adjustment is a push and slide, as you would expect. And then there's a little opening right here, a little indentation for your finger. There's a push button. You push this little push button and the paper support finger raises up. And this little knurled knob that you pull down, that is the all clear for the tabulator. That's the tab clear. Here's your precision made in Western Germany badging on the back of the Carriage. The left margin setting, again, push and slide. The Carriage return lever, line advance. And right here, this little knurled knob, this is the temporary line spacing disconnect for the variable that returns you to the same line spacing once you flip it back. But it also has the right platen knob functions as the permanent variable. You can push this in and it becomes a permanent change to the line spacing, the right knob. That's rather unusual. Line spacing selector is this little red arrow with a pointer, and it's actually controlled by a knob up here. It is 1, 1.5, and 2. So a single line spacing is 2 clicks, 2 half clicks. The middle position is 3 clicks, and the bottom position is 4. So 1, 1.5, and 2 line spacing. Does not have a Carriage release on the left side like a lot of small portables are that way, and that might be one of the only things that makes it less feature-filled than an Olivetti Lettera 22, for instance. So to remove the ribbon cover, grasp it by the front corners on the sides and push it up, and then the little protrusion on the frame comes out of the little hole in the back of the ribbon cover. You sort of push it to the rear and lift it off. There is no sound insulation on the ribbon cover. It does have these little prongs for securing it back into the body. And then right down here underneath the ribbon cover on the right side is your touch selector. So it goes from plus toward the rear to lighter touch toward the keyboard. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different positions for the touch selector. So there's a little metal spring prong here, and those engage the little protrusions on the ribbon cover to secure the ribbon cover in place. So to put the ribbon cover back in place, you actually have to mate up these little square holes with a little molded bent marks, I guess, bent little frame features on the back behind the ribbon spools like that, and then push the front down into place to lock it into place like that. So the Exemplar has these 2 plastic paper guides with a little printed paper scale and some holes for putting a pen or pencil in to draw lines. These do not articulate or bend up, so be careful with the brackets. Mine are in good shape. And this particular machine came with metal spools. This uses the back tension method like some of the earlier Olympias. So it does not use eyelets. So when you get to the end of the ribbon, this guide flips forward due to back tension of the ribbon, and that causes it to reverse. It's actually not just back tension, it's the fact that the ribbon pack, let me move over here. So when the ribbon pack gets down toward the center, the angle of the ribbon is more severe, and it causes a more severe angle, and then that combined with the back tension causes that lever to flip. Whereas when the ribbon pack is completely on the spool like here, the ribbon is coming off here at a very shallow angle, so the angle between here and here is almost a straight line, so you don't have that same angle effect. So it is using the tension of the ribbon, but because it has to be angled in toward the hub in order to have that proper angle to flip it back. So you don't need eyelets. This is a DIN 2103 spool. So I wanted to point out this feature. Right here, this little conical protrusion coming off the bottom right of the carriage is actually the end of the drawband. It has this little conical thing and it fits in a hole there. And it looks like there is a hole with a slot in it. And it looks like what this is intended for is you could actually take off the drawband under tension and hook it into this little bracket to secure it when you want to remove the carriage, which I think is a very interesting feature. So one thing I like about this machine is the adjustments for on feet and motion, which are your upper and lower case adjustments, are both readily accessible on either side of the carriage. So this screw right here down at the bottom is the lowercase position, and this is the uppercase position. So right here are the equivalent adjustments on the left side as well, and the idea is to adjust both sides so they're balanced out and the shifting is the same on both the left and the right side of the printing line. Well, okay, the case is very interesting because, you know, it reminds me somewhat of the Bichrome Selector in the sense that it's brown leather, and it also has this little storage compartment up above where you can put papers and things, documents, typing paper perhaps. So in that sense, it's a real practical carrying typewriter. You sort of have your entire office in this typewriter in terms of having your typing paper, your documents, whatever you're working on, even a correction tape cartridge, for instance, you could put in there. So it makes it quite handy, very similar to the Bichrome Selector in terms of carrying. The only caveat I would say, it's a little bit more difficult to get into the case because you have this metal lip. I have to get the case on and I have to get this metal lip back here underneath the bottom of the typewriter. So we're trying to get that there. And usually what works for me is I pick it up like this and I just make sure that the metal lip is underneath the back of the typewriter. And then getting this lock to line up sometimes is a little tricky. I have to squeeze them, kind of get them in like that, make sure they lock good, and then test it to make sure it is secured before you pick it up. Well, let's do a test typing, shall we? I have a scrap of paper. Feeds pretty good. This is an old platen. It's not a new platen. Well, to me, the Princess Exemplar 300 feels more solid than, let's say, a Hermes Rocket or Baby or an Olivetti Letter 22. It has a little bit heavier, solid of a touch. Reminds me a lot more of the Olympia Splendid lineup. Maybe not quite as smooth as that, but we'll have to leave that impression for another video. We're going to do a comparison, of course, between a lot of these machines. I really like the overall feel of this machine, the solidity of it. Well, this Princess Exemplar 300 kind of surprised me as to the quality of it and the number of features on it, considering most what you might call ultra portables or flat portables or lightweight portables often don't have a full feature set. As I indicated earlier, the Letter 22 is one of those exceptions. It had Bichrome and touch selector and tabulator. This has all three of those as well. So this is a little bit less common for us stateside to see, and I'm very pleased with it. I'm very impressed with it, but there will be a follow-up video, of course, a couple of them. I want to compare this to some of my other lightweight portables in my collection. It would be a fun comparison. Hope you stick around for that. Having a portable typewriter is really about being able to go out places more convenient than what a desktop or a larger machine might provide you with in terms of portability, and being able to be creative wherever you're at. So in that spirit, I remind you, as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.